Lori, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Come take a seat.
Hi. Hi, how are you? Good.
Good afternoon. Everything going okay today?
Yeah, everything's good.
Okay. So as you know, we're going to talk about some mid-year reflection, looking at your data. See a lot of positive things, a lot of positive things to discuss. Before we even start talking about the benchmark data, the SRI data, I want to celebrate just the hard work that you've been put in, even going back to last year. Now, I was at the high school a couple of years ago. We started talking about SGPs, and that was something that I was very far removed from because we didn't have it at the high school. But I do remember it impacting a lot of people, and it just kind of a wave of frustration that it brought about to the middle school and even district. So I want to make sure I celebrate things and things are noticed when due. So I want to start off the meeting before talking about this stuff and talking about your SGP score from last year was actually a 3.6.
Wow.
3.6. How do you feel about that?
That's awesome.
I thought so. And I want to make sure that people understand that. I know it can look a different way. The fact that you got a 3.6 and that 7th grade data your team had last year was so high, that's something to be celebrated. So good job on that.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Now, so going into the benchmark portion, the review piece, I want you to start off by just kind of speaking to us about what you took away from the benchmark comparison activities, what you saw regarding the highest performing standards and the lowest performing standards.
Okay, so something that I did notice that my class score compared to the school, which is the district, was above average, and class growth compared to the district was also above average.
Okay.
The percentage of students predicted to meet or exceed compared to 17-18 Park was above. The class that I did have similar is a lower level class, but they also did make a lot of growth, which was great.
Okay. What do you attribute that growth to? Because as I'm seeing a lot of green, and obviously you're doing something right. So what do you kind of attribute that to? What are you doing?
Well, usually I start the day off with the book club portion where I conference with each of my students. I get to about 4 or 5 every day, and we meet and we discuss the novels that they're reading. I ask them different types of questions. It's actually become my favorite part of my lesson for the day.
I'm sure Ms. Farrar would love to hear that.
I feel like I'm really making a connection with my students in that way. I've also had other kids that, like, they're reading a trilogy, and I was able to find them the 2nd or 3rd part of the trilogy of the book. Like, I asked the librarian if they have the book, and she would get it for me.
Do you find the kids are asking for the, like, are they interested to where, like, they're looking forward to getting to the next piece or the next part of the series?
A lot of the kids, as soon as they finish reading a book, they're excited to tell me that they finished reading the book, so they can't wait to come up and talk to me about it again. So I've started doing something else, like in the back of my room. Every time they finish a book, I write the title of the book on a book spine. I put it on the wall. It's called Reader's Gonna Read. I also have them create a book spine for a book that they recommend to their other classmates, and they decorated it. They put the title, the author. I put it on the front door when you first walk into my classroom. And then I posted on the door how many books we've read in all 3 of my classes for the year. So we're now at like almost 125 novels read.
That's great.
So that's cool. It's like an average of 2 to 3 per kid.
So when we created this reflection forum, we knew that we wanted to discuss the instructional goal for this year, which was book love. And we also knew we needed to reflect on benchmark B. So we kind of changed those questions around a little bit. And although we didn't ask you to make that connection within this form, we wanted you to start off by thinking of how that book club and how that instructional goal impacted the benchmark, because our goal is obviously to have them enjoy reading again and love our reading, but ultimately increase their comprehension and their ability to work with the complex texts that they're going to see at grade level. So before we get into book club, because I want to hear so much more about it, tell me a little bit about what you saw when you did this chart. This chart is new, so talk a little bit about it.
So, something that I noticed, the highest performing skill was vocabulary in my classes, and I really think that has to do with my kids going on to Membeam a lot throughout the week. Plot is something that I've been focusing on a lot, even in the book love part of, we're talking about the events that take place and the novels that they're reading. I did notice some low performing skill was interpreting visuals and graphs, so I'm making sure that I'm covering that in small group.
Okay.
And something else was, I think it was characterization. I'm covering that in whole group this week.
Talk about how you're covering the interpreting visuals and graph. That's a low standard across the board for grades 6, 7, and 8. Are you finding enough information in what you have in your materials, or are you finding outside sources to help?
I actually used the questions that were on the benchmark that went along with the map.
Okay.
I had to read with the informational text.
Okay.
Because I wanted them to see, why they weren't able to answer the questions properly.
Okay.
And interpret the maps.
Good. Okay.
You spoke about the Membeam and the vocabulary piece. That was kind of one of the higher performing skills. How are you, because we're trying to talk to different people to see how they're infusing in their class. How are you utilizing that? How are you incorporating into the class?
Well, when I'm in the back meeting with a small group of students and I'm focusing on a certain skill, all my students are grouped according to their needs.
Okay.
And I went off of the benchmark data.
Okay.
So my first group is the kids that struggled with vocabulary. They're going on to Membeam. I make sure they have headphones so they can hear the way the words are pronounced.
Okay, okay.
Then my second group, whatever Linkit standard that they had a hard time with, they're working on the Linkit progress monitoring lessons. And my third group goes on to News ELA, that's if they're struggling with informational text.
Okay.
And then the fourth group I have goes on to Common Lit, and that's if they need extra practice with reading literature.
Do you find that certain students are like identifying those Membeam words like in their novels or other texts? I know we're talking to some teachers, they talked about like student excitement when identifying those
Yeah, because
Membeam
then they're able to make the connection. They see the word on Membeam, then they're seeing it somewhere else, so
Gotcha.
they're excited to bring that up.
Cool. What's good?
Do you see a difference in vocabulary in those specific standards after using Membeam for a period of time?
Absolutely.
Mr. Brown thinks I work for Membeam. So
Yeah, she's always talking about the
Well,
program.
before Membeam, I was using vocabulary.com, and I did see a little bit of a difference, but since using Membeam, I've seen
Good.
high
And the kids
growth
like
with
it.
vocabulary, and the kids love it.
Good.
They're really interested in using it.
Okay, so let's talk some numbers. Let's talk some bucket jumper. Let's talk some bottom line numbers, and kind of get a picture where where we're at so far and kind of where we came from last year. So obviously you were not part of the 6th grade team last year. You were part of the 7th grade team last year.
Right.
And as you know, they give us a target each year. So I'll pull a chart up really quick. And last year for 2017-2018, our target was 34.2. As we shared with the department, we demolished that target. That's one thing we were all proud about, with 41% as a school. So we want to keep that momentum going, because that was probably one of the highlights of the summer when that information came in. Ms. Ferrara text me out the blue and was like, we killed the goal, and so we were kind of in such a great place. We want to keep that momentum going. So just to break it down, the bottom line, a lot of that came from the 8th grade score and the 7th grade score. So 8th grade last year, or 7th grade last year, had 47%. 8th grade also had 47%, and our 6th grade was 31%. So obviously that was an area that we truly needed to focus on, because we want that to go across the board for all grade levels. So being that the 8th grade and the 7th grade scores were so high, we said, listen, how can we change the dynamics of the teams and attack it differently? So as you know now, you're on the 6th grade team as a part of that transition, and we're going to look at the 6th grade data for this year. So our target for this year was 34.2 last year. This year is 36.7%. That is our overall goal as a school between all grade levels. So what we tried to do was kind of see what, at bare minimum or bottom line, what number would be necessary for each grade level to hit that 36.7% target. And for the 6th grade is 152. So 152 is the number. We need 152. We kind of think of it as you're going to dinner. A lot of us are going to dinner, and the bill comes, it's $152. How are we splitting up that bill? What's the bottom line? What does every person have to give in order to reach that $152 mark? And if you want to throw a couple extra bucks in as a tip, we're not complaining about that. So 152 is the goal, and right now, based off of benchmark B, you have 38 kids that are at this point in meeting or exceeding. So it seems as if right now, if the year was to end, and we use this as a predictor for the state test, you've contributed a lot, well over the 36%. But I'm not foreign to asking you for more. So let's look at our numbers, let's analyze the data and see if there's anyone else that you think could potentially contribute to that overall number.
Okay, so I know that benchmark C, they need to have at least a 66 to be considered meeting. So I have to take a look at my kids that are close to getting a 66.
Okay.
So my first class, I would say.
As you're doing that, what I'm going to do is go into Linkit,
Okay.
and I'm going to pull up the A to B comparison,
Okay.
and we'll take a look at maybe some of those bubble kids to see if there's anyone else that we can pull from that bubble group.
Okay. So I have 2 kids in my bubble group that I think would get to meeting.
Okay.
One of them is attending tutoring, which definitely will help them get to.
Oh, that's a
that
tutor?
goal.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Let's see. Just gonna go to my last class.
Before you're fine here, Jim, look at the bubble students right here. Talk a little bit about those 5 students and what you see.
Well, the one kid is actually the kid in green, 63. So that was like the Lincoln mistake.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
On B, because on B meeting is 63, so
Right.
it's the other 4 kids.
So he should actually be meeting already.
Right,
Yes.
he's actually meeting, so then there's 4 bubble kids. 2 of the 4 are attending the ESSA tutoring program, so that should help them.
Okay.
The other 2 students, I really think through my whole group instruction, small group instruction, and since I'm focusing on what they really need, they should also be meeting by the time C comes around and get the 66%.
Okay.
So I think that I can bring 4 kids.
Oh, so you give him a tip. Okay. We'll take it.
My tip is 4 kids.
Okay.
And then the meeting and exceeding students, you think, even though that will jump to 66,
I think
as a cut score, that they'll all remain?
I think they should remain there.
Okay.
For the most part. I also think maybe some approaching kids could possibly get to meeting.
Okay.
Because a lot of my approaching kids are also attending tutoring.
So based off of the 38 that you had, and then the 4 bubble, we're looking at about 42 kids.
42, yes.
Okay. So we're going to continue meeting with the remainder of the 6th grade team, and we'll have everybody else's, once we fill this in, the goal is to be at 152. We still have a lot more teachers to meet with. We're at 107 right now. So that 42 would actually be a pretty good chunk.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so moving on from the buckets, we're going to talk about the SRI data, and then we're going to talk about the book club, because that's the instructional focus, and it really goes hand in hand. As you know, our overall goal is to improve the amount of students who are reading on grade level. So, SRI data for the bucket. Speak to us about this data.
Okay, so a lot of kids have moved into the higher categories from September, which is something that I'm pretty happy about. I also think that has to do with the book love component, the kids being motivated to read and talk to me about the novels that they're reading.
Okay. I gotta say, when I did a couple of walkthroughs, you had you were asking about the protagonist, the antagonist, and you were kind of going deep with some of the questions when we had them in that one-on-one setting. And to see the fact that, I know Ms. Farrar spoke about it, but I hear people talk about initiatives all the time. If the people aren't implementing it properly, it's not going to make a difference. So I know this summer she was so excited about it. It's great to see when somebody really takes it to the level you did, and as you can see, the data is definitely benefiting your students.
Thank you. So the kids that are not on grade level yet, if you see the 830 to 875, then the 876 to 924, those students are less than 100 points away from getting onto grade level, but I really think by the last SRI that they should get there, if not the next one.
Okay.
Most of those students are attending tutoring also.
Okay.
I actually have the opportunity to meet with 5 of them. I mean, 4 of my own on Tuesday and Thursday.
Oh, that's a better idea. Cool.
And I also started novel conferencing and doing the book club portion with them at tutoring.
Okay.
So they're reading 2 different novels actually with me a day, which is awesome.
Okay.
Those kids all did go up on the SRI,
Okay.
so I did encourage them to continue coming to tutoring because it's working for them.
Okay. Good. All right. Okay. Good. That makes sense because even looking at we were reviewing the end of the year targets, and as you know, that screen kind of the goals change throughout the year. But based off of the beginning of the year, 75% reading on grade level, and now you're at 83.9, almost 84%. But still 2 more administrations to go. You're definitely doing an excellent job in that class. All right, so enough about that piece of it. Let's go on to your book love reflection. I know Ms. Farrar was really big on that. Has been our instructional focus for the year. People bought into it, so kind of just tell us how you've been doing with it and what you took away from it thus far.
Okay, so every time my kids enter my classroom daily, I have a list of 4 or 5 kids that I'm going to be meeting with. I tell them what to bring up to the conference with me. They usually have to bring up their portfolio, the novel that they're reading, or a novel that they've finished reading. So I have created a sheet that I put into their portfolio, and it has like the dates that we're conferencing on the novel that they're reading. I put the title in there, the number of pages that.
This sheet right here?
Yeah, the sheet that's right there at the store. So I put the number of page numbers that are in their book, and then when they finish reading the book, they go into their portfolio, they give it a rating from 1 through 5, 5 being the highest, and then we talk about why they gave the book that certain rating.
Okay.
And I've actually had them do something else, where after they finish reading their book, they go into the back of my classroom. If you scroll down, I have a picture of it. And they're able to, actually, after they finish a book, I write the title of the book that they finished reading, and I put it onto the book spine here. This has really motivated them to want to keep reading more books. They're excited to tell me when they do finish reading a book.
I like that. The hater's going to hate, reader's going to read.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a visual, so everyone can see, who's reading what. I've also done something else. If you scroll down a little bit more, that's my data wall. Scroll down a little bit more. Sorry.
Why? More?
Yep. Okay, so I made this on my back wall. It says like, this book is so, and then they fill in the blank and they talk about a book that they recommend.
Okay.
And I've divided it between fiction and nonfiction, because in case they want to read a fiction book, they can look at the book recommendations for fiction novels and then for nonfiction texts as well. So after they finish a book, I had them go to the back, and they even gave it like 1 through 5 stars, whatever they rated in the portfolio cover sheet that I wrote down.
Okay.
And they wrote why they really liked the book. So anytime a kid finishes a novel, they're able to go to the back, they're able to read the recommendations, and hopefully one of the recommendations influences their next choice from my library.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's cool to see.
And then I also had them, from that recommendation, create like a book spine that I put on the front of the door if you scroll up. And they wrote, that's it. They wrote the title of the book, the author, and they drew a little picture to go along with it. I try to make it look like a bookshelf. And then it says, the students in room 1055 have read
Oh, okay.
I totaled the amount of books that we've read in all my classes, so we're actually up to about 125 books read between the 3 classes.
Wow, okay.
So we talk about, obviously, everything you're doing here, leading towards the goal that we have. Talk a little bit about how the culture has changed in your classroom with this goal, or do you think it has?
I definitely think that the culture has changed, because now I hear like another kid telling, why don't you read this book? Like when I met with a kid last week, she was saying, oh, I got this, a genre recommended this book to me. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You guys are talking about the books that, you liked reading. And I think that that's really why everything else is falling into place, and they're growing with their Lexiles and on their benchmark scores, because without them being motivated to read, then they won't be able to grow as much in my class. So I'm proud of all my kids.
How does it differ from last year and like your approach to independent reading last year? Do you think you've done?
Well, last year, I met one-on-one with kids, and I did mostly like writing conferences.
Okay.
I'm still doing the writing conferences along with the book club and everything else that I'm talking to them about. But last year, I wasn't really able to keep track of the novels that they were reading. Like I couldn't even tell you the exact amount of novels that they read during independent reading, but now with it this way, they know that I'm holding them accountable and they need to actually be reading. You occasionally catch the student that's looking around the room and, they're not actually reading, but now they know I'm going to be calling up to talk to them about their book. But they know it's not like a gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're actually excited to come up to me and talk to me about what they're reading.
Yeah, because what we found, especially at the middle school level, is the students who enjoyed reading continue to read and grow more as readers, and those who don't or struggle kind of start to fall off. So you think that those struggling readers, that the approach that you've taken in your classroom has really kind of made a difference with just enjoying reading again?
I definitely do. Like even the kid, he was in red in the beginning of the year. Like he has definitely taken an interest in reading. I could tell by the way he's participating in my class every day, and he just seems really interested, which is something that's cool to see.
Good, great.
So let's go to, I know we had a couple of kids who were kind of on the cusp, and you created action plans for some of your students. You submitted some of them. So just walk us through a couple of the action plans that you created.
Okay, so this first student is a student in my first class. I did call home, recommend that he comes to tutoring. He's going to ESSA tutoring during the PM sessions.
Okay.
He started out with a September SRI 838. The last one we took last week, he went up to an 867, so he's definitely catching up to the 925, which is grade level. If you notice his benchmark score, he almost went up 50%, like doubled his score, which was awesome. So I had wrote down, I looked at the benchmark and I looked at the skills that he was weak in, and cause and effect, compare and contrast, genre, characteristics, inferences. These are some things that I noticed that he needs to work on. I wrote down like the different types of texts.
Okay.
I went off of the DRA also, and if you notice wide reading, reflection, and the last one, metacognitive awareness, that's something that he needs to work on. So I plan to conquer the different reading skills in small group instruction. Informational text, I know he needs to go into Newsella more and practice reading informational text, answering questions. That'll also fall into place with whole group instruction when we're reading literature. For informational text, for literary text, I'm also going to have him practice going off Common Lit, so we can practice the different standards. And let's see what else. Also, the genre characteristics. That's something that I always talk about when we're doing the book love portion. We talk about the genre of the book that they're reading. I also have something in my classroom where I have all the different genres listed, and they each have like a clothespin clip. I put their name on it,
Okay.
so everyone knows like what genre each person in my class is reading. So
Also, there was a report that Ms. Ferrara had found, was it in SAM, for the individual student one. Also, just something to throw in your toolbox. It had like individual student reports where it gave like recommendations.
oh, the reading, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, as part of my book love portion,
Okay.
this week, since we didn't take the SRI last week, I'm going over, because how it breaks it down, the recommended reading report is the 3 genres that they select the day of the SRI, which is the questions that they're given, the passages. Then it like spits out a book after they get their Lexile. It's a list of all the 3 genres that they chose on that day with books that are close to their Lexile. So I did give that out to them too.
So what you're telling me is you're on top of it. I'm gonna just take a step
Sorry.
back. That's what I like to hear. That shows that you're taking initiative, and I'm not surprised but responsible here. So good job, keep up the good work.
I also, during the book love portion, I'm showing them what's called a student action report that's also on SAM, and it shows all the scores that they've gotten for the year. And it shows the proficiency. So you can see, like who was basic and that goes to proficient or proficient to advanced. So they're able to see that, and then I kind of sit with them and I create a goal with them where I want them to be at.
That's excellent, because something we found is even when we look at the student behaviors, we'll go to that part next. Teacher behaviors, student behaviors along the instructional goals. So one thing was awareness of the Lexile level and what it means. A lot of times we'll go into a classroom and ask the kid their score, and they'll say 874, but in reality, it's just a number. They don't know what the number means. They don't know what the grade level score is or how far they're away from it, or even what's realistic to achieve. The fact that you're having those conversations and breaking it down to that level, that's a big piece. So I'm glad to hear that.
If you go back to the reflection sheet, I have in each student's folder, I think it's up more. So every student in my class has a class folder. Oh, that's that one. And I input every score that they get on the SRI and the benchmark. And then right before we take the next SRI, the next benchmark, I sit with them and we create a goal. And then at the end of every marking period, I also give out awards to each kid, like who made the most SRI growth, who had the highest writing average.
You gotta celebrate it. You gotta celebrate it. That's one thing I know that you do. And that's one thing I gotta give the department across the board. A lot of people are doing some pretty killer celebrations regarding their data. We're getting the kids hype about it. So last thing, we're gonna look at the instructional practices. We want you guys to reflect on.
Can we just talk about your library really quick, and just, is there anything you feel how do you feel the library that we've created for this year is working? Are you finding anything that's missing?
In comparison to last year, since you did place that order in the summer after we had met, I have a lot more books that are higher Lexile, and that's what I really needed. So it's definitely been more effective with my classes this year. So what I do for my library is each basket is a different Lexile. So after they take the SRI, I tell them what basket that they're able to choose from. They don't know that the baskets mean certain Lexiles because I don't want to embarrass them and I don't want other kids to know what their Lexiles are. But I think it's really helping them that they're reading books that are close to their reading level. But if they do want to read a book that's in another basket, I'm excited that they want to read, so I do allow it to happen.
Good, very good, excellent. I see your little plug in there for the colored pencil. We'll discuss that.
And then last is the reflection of the practices. So we wanted you to take a look at the practices for the department, put in green things you have in place, yellow things you're working to implement, things that are not on the list but are working.
So these are the instructional practices we talked about in the beginning of the year. What it would look like, we laid out this whole plan, what we wanted to do. We wanted to change the culture, gave kind of the background behind it. But then what does it look like? So when Mr. Brown and I kind of sat and talked before this reflection, we wanted to make sure that things that we expected, and although we gave to you, you guys actually interpreted. So I'm curious to see how, when you looked at the student behaviors and the teacher behaviors, and the overall goals for the department when it came to this, how did you, I see everything's in green, so did anything stand out to you?
Well, after we've had all the workshops from the beginning of the year or throughout the school year and meeting in PLCs, I made sure that I listened to what you guys were encouraging us to do, and I made sure I put it into practice. And you could see that everything that you told us to do works because my kids have made a lot of growth in their Lexile and on the benchmark with the reading skills. So,
any next steps for you with, you know, how this was a, you know, a learning process for all of us. So any next steps from things that you saw that you want to kind of take to the next level?
Something that I did want to do with with some of my kids after they finish reading a novel is to create like a PowerPoint on the book that they've read, maybe talk a little bit about it, why they recommend the book, and have them do some presentations so they get used to it.
Good. Just make sure that there's some choice in there as well. You know, one of the things that we wanted to move away from was students so worried about having to do a book report or a presentation that they lost sight of their enjoyment of reading, and they were so focused on that end product.
Right.
So if students want to share, like if you meet one-on-one with a student and they're so excited to share the book, that enthusiasm is contagious. And you said it yourself, it makes other kids want to read it.
Right.
So, you know, ask kids to volunteer to do that kind of stuff, and they can present however they want. You know, we you know, for the summer reading for the One School, One Book, we watch book trailers all the time. I mean, kids are more proficient at technology than we are, so they can go create something like that. And then there might be a kid who doesn't want to. It might be okay that ending of a book, just a simple conversation with you is okay.
Okay.
You know, so just making sure that there's a choice in that, or it could be just a small group discussion. Why don't you go and share with your group your book? You seem to really love it. Like, just go and take that step of those speaking and listening skills, but without the, okay, now you have to go present. Because that can kind of take away from our goal. So we just have to be cognizant of it.
Ms. Doherty, thank you for your time. As you see in your data, you're off to a great start. And like I said, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right.
Any questions for us?
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.